Hi, I'm Rachel Dillon.
And I'm Marcus Dillon.
And this podcast is Who's Really the Boss, where we highlight the joys
and challenges
of running a business with your spouse or family.
Our mission is to strengthen families and businesses by helping listeners avoid the mistakes we have made so they can lead
and live happily ever after. All right, welcome back to another episode of Who's Really the Boss podcast. We have Marcus as always and a very special guest, Matt Schomburg. Matt, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. It's fun to be here.
Well, Matt is our in real life friend and next door neighbor. And so will you give a little introduction of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys having me here. My name's Matt Schomburg. We have been in the Katy-Fulshear area now since 2001. I started my small business in 2002. I've got a State Farm agency in Katy. We moved out to the Fulshear area in 2018 and met the Dillons shortly before and have become real good friends. And so it's an honor to be here and, you know, being on this special podcast with them here.
Yeah, Marcus, tell a little bit more about how we met Matt and his wife, Heather.
Yeah, so being in some of the same circles, small business owners in Katy, we started DBA in 2011, right? And after planning the business in the Katy area, started to see all these vehicles with this face on it. And
Some
Matt,
biceps back then.
yeah, Matt loves to put his face and people all over vehicles and advertise that way. So kind of knew who Matt was before he even met. But then after we moved from our neighborhood in Fulshear to our new neighborhood in Fulshear and started building a house, started seeing some of those same vehicles at the lot next door as that house was going up. So yeah, it's one of those where buyer beware, I guess, whenever. But really started to kick off probably meeting for the first time and that friendship and everything as we were building the house. Get to commiserate on the build process and the builder still to this day. But yeah, and then, you know, after moving in, Matt and Heather have 4 boys, some overlap in ages there with our 2 girls, and just, you know, in some of the same circles there. Being a small business owner, we obviously, you know, go through a lot of the pain points with team members and clients and things like that. And, you know, there's just a lot of overlap, and he likes to go to Astros games and we've got Astros tickets. So, you know, it's one of those too. So,
yeah, funny enough, I used to work out at the Y in the mornings. And so would always see your van in the parking lot. I don't think I knew who went with the van as far as seeing you inside the Y. But yeah. So we go way back, even before the neighbor gate was in place. So, yeah, absolutely love that. Well, before we get started on our topic of conversation, I want to ask you, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oh man, I've got a few of them, but you know, I think I've got a mentor who's a State Farm agent, and so early in my career, what did he tell me? Work hard, be good with people, and spend money, right? And so I really took that maybe too far, especially on
number 3. You have
spend the money
mastered.
part. Yeah. So I like to joke. You know, I started my career in 2002 as a State Farm agent, and I'm not a very talented person. You know, I'm in the sales industry, and people have to like you, and so I've been able to do that well, but I am not a polished salesperson. You know, I just really get sincere and I'm passionate about our product, and I think that comes across. But from a talent perspective, I don't have a lot. From a work ethic perspective, I've got a whole lot. And so, you know, when I heard that, hey, work hard, spend money, be good with people, that really stuck with me, because you see a lot of people, especially small business owners, they get to a certain point and they're happy. And they just lose the drive to continue to grow. And, you know, I think Marcus and I have a lot in common. And Rachel, we're builders. We don't see a finish line. We just want to keep going just for the sake of going. I mean, there's not a happy horizon. It's just, hey, how big can I build this? And so for me, it's been fun just from, you know, outworking people.
Yeah. I think that that explains a lot, number one. But then second, I don't know about for you and Heather, but that satisfaction or contentment and wrestling with that is a lot of the conversations that happen too in our house. And I think that's probably going to be talked about here in a bit too. So,
well, definitely wanted to have you specifically as one of our guests. We love you and we love the Schomburg experience. So just having you here is a great day. But also because you and Heather worked together.
We did.
And work together. Yeah. And so really wanted to get the details of what that looks like. But before we go on, if the podcast ended here, no truer words have ever been spoken that you two are similar in those three things. And I'm thankful for it.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that, you know, you need balance, right? And so very thankful for that.
We need that break in the other half of our relationship.
Yeah, it's the person that can actually put some pause into decisions. Same person that comes back and says, "Why didn't you listen to me?" Or "I told you so," in a loving and caring manner. The other thing about Matt and Heather, obviously, is their belief system, their moral values, and that makes it really easy to align friendship and family. So, you know, that also kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of the similarities in how we run the business, run our families, you know, experience life, faith-based.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the beginning, let's go back to the very early days of Matt Schomburg State Farm. Yeah. What was the vision that you had for the business back then?
So, you know, it's funny. I was one of the youngest State Farm agents hired in the history of the company. So a little bit about my story. I'm a third generation State Farm agent. My grandfather was a State Farm agent. He had 5 kids, 4 of which became insurance folks. 3 were State Farm agents. One of those was my mama. So when I graduated from college, my dad said, "Hey, Matt, I need you." I had a job offer from a company called Wallace. It was a sales opportunity. He says, "I need you to call your boss, quit. I really want you to work for State Farm." I didn't have an offer with State Farm. So kind of a leap of faith. Said, "Okay, well, I'm going to go to work for State Farm." Back then you had to work 3 years internal State Farm before you could become a State Farm agent. So I went down that path. It changed 2 years in, jumped out and started my State Farm agency. So I think back, Heather and I got married in 2001.
I think met in college, right?
Met in college. Somebody got in a car accident. Yeah, that's a story for another day.
And you were like, "Hey, I know an insurance agent," or
I had 0 riz, is what the kids are calling it these days. And so I said, well, maybe if I crash into her, she'll notice me. And so I intentionally hit my now wife's car.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's one for the
Good story. So when we got married, I remember having to go through this. We got married in a Catholic church, and you have to do pre-marriage whatevers. And we went away for a weekend. It was, I don't know what it was, but we spent a lot of time reflecting and praying. And at that point, I really, really, really wanted Heather to work for me, right? And it was, hindsight, it was a blessing that she chose not to, right? So we would have been down to one income. But knowing who I am, I would have leaned on her too much, and I wouldn't have made a name for myself. I wouldn't have been able to prove to myself that I could actually do the job, but that Heather was doing the job. Now, in 2005, I did finally convince her to come to work for me. And so that was fun. I mean, I was working with my spouse. Now I was working a lot of hours, so she would come and go. I mean, she was there full time, but I was there till, 12, 1, 2 in the morning. I'm not really sure what I was doing, but I was there. To the extent, a lot of people joke now, they see the wraps in town, they see some of the guerrilla marketing that we've done over the years, they know us from some of the board work that we do. We love Katie, we want to give back as much as possible to Katie and Fulsher. But they don't necessarily see the early days and the hours that, and I know y'all did this, right? I mean, 18 to 20 hours a day. This is probably a terrible story to tell you, but my office was right next door to a liquor store, and I didn't have any customers when I started. I started scratch, and so my fake boss was like, "You should probably call 200 people a day." I said, "Okay." So I'd walk over to the liquor store, buy a 6-pack, and try and finish the 6-pack before I finished making my dials. So the phone calls got a lot more fun.
It's like the back nine of a golf course, So
They got a lot more fun. But at some point now, my family, we have addiction in my family, and I got not lucky, and I don't mean to make light of addiction at all, but my addiction was not drugs. My addiction was work. To an extent, in 2008, Heather had been with me about 3 years, and she wasn't necessarily happy because I was married to State Farm. I was not married to Heather at that point. And so we worked together. We worked together very well. She was fantastic. She was super organized. She implemented a ton of stuff to get us to where we are today. But there came that faithful day in 2008, 2009, where we thought it was going to save our marriage to part ways. And so I got to fire my wife, which I love doing.
Yeah. That was just the first time, right?
That was just the first time she got fired.
Yeah.
So what was the original intention? Like, what did you hope would come out of her being part of the business?
We needed help. We were, in 2005, we finished #1 in the enterprise. 2006, we duplicated that effort. And so we just didn't have the capacity, right? I mean, I was a 27, 28-year-old idiot, not knowing what he was doing, just there working as hard as I could. We were averaging over 200 phone calls a day. I just needed somebody that had my back, right? And there's no better person in the business than a spouse, because they're married to the business as well, right? They're married to you, they're married to the business. And I have great employees now, right? And I had great employees then, but they never have the same, whatever the word is.
They don't take it home with them. And you don't want that for them, honestly, too, because we can't turn it off, and it follows us wherever we go.
Yeah. And that was hard for me early on, because I wanted everybody to be just as engaged as I was. And when I didn't get it, I'd get mad and I'd fire them, right? And so I've been through well over 100 employees.
Wow.
And so I learned that it's much easier to spoil your team and give them whatever they want and overpay them, and as much love as I can, because now everybody in my office is tenured. They've been there a decade plus, and we like to say, hey, look, we're not all created the same. Just like your business, there's a difference in CPA firms, right? Yeah. And I know you guys don't say you're a CPA anymore, but a business advisor, right? Yeah. And there's a difference in State Farm agents, right? We are not all created the same. As much as our company wants us to be cookie cutter and you get the same experience regardless of who you call, we've taken that to a totally different level. And tenure of your team is a big part of that.
Yeah, you're not wearing khakis and a red shirt today, so
I got my red on.
A little bit, right? So
my khakis are my fat pants right now. They'd fall off.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing there is too. So Heather worked in the business. You mentioned you work with, like, you were kind of born into State Farm almost, and your dad, who encouraged you to go to work for State Farm, he didn't work for State Farm. It was your mom, your kind of lineage from that side. Yeah. And now you still work with your mom. You still work with your brother. Obviously, you fired who you could, but you can't fire some others.
I'd love to fire a couple others.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think that's the thing with Heather, seeing the path, and that probably aligns to about the time, 2008, 2009, had 4 kids about that time?
Yeah, Miller was born in 2008.
Okay. So just a lot going on personally, and kind of protecting the family from the business, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Heather reminds me often that I was not a father figure for our older 2 boys, right? I just wasn't there. And luckily, by the time we had dialed it in about 2008, 2009, they were still young, right? Tyler was born in 2003, so he was 6. So I still got to be the best dad possible. I coached every sport for my boys, did the watchdog program, was at everything. And that's a gift to being an entrepreneur and having your own business, is the freedom and flexibility that it creates. So
I think you fully redeemed that through like the junior high and high school years for those boys. You are everywhere. You and Heather actually host the small group for our senior, for our oldest, and have for the last 4 years. And we really appreciate that. I think you guys almost got tricked into that, because it was like, can you host this one night because this other house isn't available? And then 4 years later, you guys are finishing it out. So.
It worked great. And ironically, we are starting the tradition again with Miller's group.
Oh,
so
nice.
We'll have the sophomores next year. So we got another 3 years of fun. And we won't have Pastor Mike, so it's going to be Pastor Matt up there. Hazing these kids.
I love it. Nice. I'm going to send Avery through the gate and tell her just, may not be your grade level, but it's close.
It's close enough.
Proximity is all there is. Give us a little bit more details about some of the challenges you and Heather had working together that kind of led to we're gonna take a break for a while, because the end of the story is she comes back in and helps all the time.
A couple times.
Yeah.
A couple.
Yeah.
She's still with us today. She's not working in a full-time capacity per se, but she's definitely still with us today. So here's a funny story. So there was a mean, nasty woman customer that we had. And I forgot what I did. I did something wrong. Or actually, you know what? Heather did something wrong. And so she fires off this just terrible email. And I reply, and you know, Heather's my wife. So I was defending her. And she goes, "You must be sleeping with that girl the way you're talking about her." I'm like, well, ironically. So we kind of missed taking care of the customer because I wanted to protect my wife. I'll tell you, there was never an issue with what Heather did at State Farm, right? The issue really was when we got home from work, guess what we talked about? State Farm. When we woke up in the morning, guess what we talked about? State Farm. Heather has absolutely no clue, nor does she care about State Farm at all today, and it has tremendously changed our conversations, our marriage. It's much better taking that from her plate. But 100% the reason we parted ways is because it was all work, 24/7. And again, I was addicted to work, and not necessarily work per se, but where we ranked in the company. And State Farm does a great job. So there's 19,000 State Farm agents in the enterprise, and they do a great job making us compete, where I would spend stupid amounts of money just to get my name on a list. I wasn't making any money, right? But my name was at the top of the list, and I absolutely loved that. Yeah. You know, in 2000, and I mentioned 0506, we finished #1 in the auto product line. 2008, we finished number 12 overall in the company. In 2009, we finished in the top 10, which is considered the trophy club for State Farm. It's about the same time that Heather had to go. But, you know, it was all work all the time. And so luckily we had a mentor, you know, and we were on a State Farm trip. Ironically, it was a study group, kind of a brain trust, super talented State Farm agents get together. We were in Colorado. And Gary Bennett, State Farm agent to this day, goes, "Matt, you need to fire her." You know, just he could see the tension in our marriage and where we were. And I'm like, I can't fire her. She's like my best employee.
Yeah.
But to save the marriage, it really was the right thing to do. And then, you know, somehow I rehired her again, fired her again, rehired her again.
Well, she's a special consultant now.
Right.
So she gets to participate in the fun stuff, like some of the trips.
She does.
And some of the team networking activities that y'all do. And so I think that's even probably better than...
That's her gift for sure.
Yeah. And she's still going to be your backstop, right? She's still going to be that second opinion and things like that. So I think the way that y'all balanced out her exit or exits and still being present in the team and knowing that there's an extension of Matt that cares about them.
Right.
I think y'all balance that out really, really well.
Yeah. And the team loves Heather, and they appreciate, you know, we take our team on a couple trips every year. And so Heather plans that, and so she spoils them. And it's something that everybody looks forward to. And I know you guys have done that as well. And it's nice to have Heather, because as a man, I don't think that way. My brain's not wired to, oh, you need Advil. Oh, you need snacks. I'm like, no, just show up. Come on, we're going to work a little bit and we're going to have fun, you know, but just to pamper the team, you need that. I need that woman to do that for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you are no less passionate about your business now than you were in the beginning or in those early days. So now that Heather has lesser of a role or spends less time within State Farm, how do you guys balance that out as far as like turning off work or bonding over something different other than State Farm?
Right. Yeah. So I'm still waiting for Heather to actually show up for like a State Farm meeting or a budget meeting at our house. I think she's just turned it off and refused to show up for the meetings. When Matt's talking about State Farm, she like zones out. She probably has invisible AirPods or whatever little ear things are that I can't see.
Just blocks it out really, really well.
She does. But so performing at a high level, there's, you know, State Farm's a huge company, but at a high level, it's a small company. And so I've got great friends in the State Farm world all across the U.S. And so we take a couple of trips with those groups every year. And so Heather's a big part of that. And and there's both male and female agents, but the majority of them are probably male. And so she's gotten real close to the wives of that group. Mm-hmm. And so it's neat that they're able to communicate and spend some time together. So she probably learns more about what's happening in the State Farm world from that group than she does from our conversations these days.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask a little bit differently, but maybe a similar question. When you are talking about State Farm, mm-hmm. how does she get you to turn it off?
I think I've just learned over the years to not talk about it.
Yeah.
I really have. It's funny. Yesterday, I won't get into the whole story, but I had an ugly text from somebody that we did something nice for. And normally I would share that, but it was State Farm related. So I didn't share it with Heather. I shared it with my workout partner, Wesley, and I shared it with Marvis, who runs my fleet. It had to do with one of our cars at the office. And just, I didn't even bring it up to Heather. It wasn't worth diving into it. So I think that's, over the years, we've just talked less and less and less. And when we do talk, it's really just high level. Mm-hmm. Here's where we are. She has been incredible just from, like you said, employees, what that is, how to keep them happy. And, as a small business owner, I don't care how many employees. If you got one employee, there's drama, right? You got 10, there's drama. You have 15, there's drama. There's always drama. And so she's got just a great grasp on, say this, do this, what about this? And so she's probably more of my HR go-to than she is, production or premium. She could
how to motivate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we met in college. It's kind of a funny story to tell you how little she could care about math and numbers. So we were both taking the same finance class, and we were neighbors. So it was kind of a Melrose Place is how we met after I crashed into her car. And I love numbers, right? Like I'm kind of a math nerd. So we were checking our finance test, right? And so we were just going through. I had mine, she had hers. I'm like, oh, you missed that one, babe. You missed that one. Oh, hell, you missed that one. I think she made like a 20 on that test. And she's never gotten any better.
I love that. Yeah, no, she has a ton of gifts. Words and taking care of people are definitely two of her gifts. Yeah. Throwing a party like no other, for sure, a gift. Yeah. And so,
and she's an editor, so she's definitely English brained and not math brained. Yeah. And so she spent a little stint at a magazine as their social editor. Her role today is to help with our social media. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to get her to edit the new customer orientation guide that you push out. I copied it.
Yeah.
And ours is not written well yet, so I'm having Heather rewrite it, and I've been asking her for 4 or 5 months. So we need to have a meeting about that. She hadn't shown up the last 4 months.
Maybe you hadn't paid her a retainer, something.
You need to make it worth her while. Take her on a trip, and then that's one of the ways that she gets that trip.
So. Or you can introduce her to ChatGPT, and it can be written in 2 seconds, like and at least a kickstart to a rewrite. So, yeah.
So any final pieces of advice for someone considering bringing their spouse into the business?
Yeah. The big thing is make sure you can turn it off. If you can't turn it off, it's not worth it. But you've got to have, a relationship is so much more than a job. And you've got to be able to separate the two of those. And Heather and I, especially early on in our marriage, were not able to do that. And that was my fault, right? I mean, again, I was in love with State Farm. I was in love with what State Farm gave me from a, pride perspective. And so if you can turn it off, it is the best thing in the world, because there's nothing better than working with your spouse, going to lunch together, being able to share stories. All the same people, you build the same relationships. And so it's really special until it's not. So if you can turn it off, go for it.
Yeah. Well, kind of like your dad did for you, and working with your mom, your brother, Heather, different people in your business that are family. What are you going to tell your boys?
Oh, wow. I don't know. That's a great question. So sometimes my boys ask if they can be a State Farm agent. I tell them no, but I don't know if their spouse, it would have to be the right deal. It would have to be the right opportunity, and it'd be interesting to see. It's going to be fun to watch, figure out where our kids go.
Yeah. And I think as parents, you want something different for your kids, because you remember easily those grinding days, and you don't want your kids to live through that. And you always, you know, the reason why we grind is so they don't have to experience that. And in that type of business, as a small business owner, some of that grind's necessary to appreciate on the other side of what we've built, right? And it will be interesting how these kids turn out, because hopefully we've given them everything that we possibly can.
Which is scary, because have you seen that little meme? It says, hard times make hard people make easy times make soft people. And so luckily my kids have shown they've got a great work ethic. Tyler, my oldest, finished number 7 in the class, loved studying, kind of a nerd. Mav's my athletic kid. I think he's got 3 jobs right now. Doesn't need a job, but the kid just loves doing whatever.
And we'll be able to sell, probably.
Yeah, and you know, incredible. And so,
I think it's worth noting that both of our kids got voted most likely to be CEO. So Maverick for the boys and Kinley for the girls for their senior class. And I thought there could be nothing more perfect or even just to be more proud of than that would be what they were voted on, rather than something about what they were wearing or how they looked, but more that it spoke so much to their work ethic and their discipline. As a parent, I'm like, oh, that is so awesome. And the fact that our next door neighbor was, you know, named the other side of that was just, incredible.
They're hustlers, and they don't need to, which is, you know, I think we've built the right foundation in our kids to see that, and you know, for whatever reason.
And it also helps that award was sponsored by Matt Schomburg, State Farm, and Dillon Business Advisors. So
I don't know. A lot of their jobs we get roped into sponsoring for our kids, or becoming, you know, fractional advisors to their businesses, just with no pay, no compensation that's
I don't know
tied
about you.
to that.
I'm floating Mavericks businesses, so
no, thankfully we are not. We do our services pro bono, but we do not. We don't inject cash into her business anymore. Anyway.
Yeah, Mav was selling hats for a while. He hadn't reimbursed me for those, and T-shirts. I'm still waiting on that check.
The pressure washing business. I'm sure that pressure washer was attained through family funds.
Schomburg credit card there.
Yeah. So looking ahead 10 years, I think 10 years from now, you'll be empty nesters, right? We'll be empty nesters.
Yeah.
What is it? Do you ever see 10 years from now, or even longer, what does Heather come back to work? Do you have to fire her again?
Yeah, no, I you know, we've been tremendously blessed. Katie's been so good to our business, and we work hard, and I want to do everything I can to give back to the community. And I share that story all the time. I said, I wouldn't be successful. I'm not talented. I would not be a success if we didn't live in Katy with Katy ISD, and we can kind of share stories about Katy ISD and Lamar Consolidated ISD, where, you know, kind of where y'all went to school and where some of our kids go to school. We're at a point now where we don't need Heather's gifts at the office. We've got the team that's driving everything. So she's going to get lucky here.
Yeah.
She's going to get
lucky. And I think some of your charitable endeavors and things like that, you can use gifts that God has given in different ways, and maybe that's what's on the other side of that. So it seems like you'll still work together for a family foundation or whatever you've got in mind, but maybe just not under the banner of State Farm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, unfortunately, Marcus, you and I are kind of built the same, where we have to have a project. I have to have a project. I won't throw you under the bus with Rachel sitting here.
Yeah. And it's hard to live next door to somebody that always has to have a project, because it is nice to spend your money. But at the same time, there's stuff that bubbles up that I'd like to do as well. But I think part of why we do what we do is, even if we were able to do what we do on a daily basis in our businesses and not have a financial reward or motivation, our lives would probably look very similar to they already do. And I think that's the unique thing about, once you find that passion, once you find that calling, is you pretty much work for free if you could. Absolutely. Now, you've got responsibilities and family and college and marriages and things to support.
Yeah.
So that's not in the cards right now, but I don't think our lives will look much different 10 to 15 years from now. And that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. If anything, so I hit my midlife crisis early. I was probably in my mid-30s.
Early this year, like every year, right?
Every year it just gets worse.
Yeah, a new crisis.
But I went to the annual prayer breakfast. I forgot who our speaker was, but they were handing out the book Halftime. I don't know if you've ever read Halftime by Bob Burford. But I read it young, and I remember just crying. There's a moving story about his family in there and kind of how he's a big-time executive at a cable company, and he has everything worldly, right? He has marked that box, but he's empty. And he goes, there has to be something else. And he was an extremely talented leader. And he said, how can I take my gifts and leave a legacy, right? And so he talks about the first half of his life being that of, one of success, and the second half being one of significance. And so that's always stuck with me. And so I love leadership. I went back to school, got my second bachelor's degree in Christian leadership. I love running my team. I've served on I don't know how many boards now, but I've ran 3 of them. I'm, the current president of the Education Foundation for KDISD, and so you put me on something, you keep me there long enough, I have to take over. It's my personality. You're the president of the Katy Chamber Board right now, so I know we have that in common. But how can I leave a legacy with servant leadership? How can I wash people's feet? Yeah. In other words, to make the biggest impact.
Well, I think it starts at home. So I think, by releasing Heather, from her day-to-day responsibilities and finding out that balance, like you said, it was good for the marriage, good for the family, good for the kids, good for grandkids or whatever's in the future. So I applaud you for making that hard decision. And it'll be fun to watch the journey unfold, especially as friends and neighbors until you build a new house. It's one of those things where glad to have you on this journey with us.
Well, I think we'll have you come back every single month until Marcus decides that it's time to fire or release me from my duties.
Well, we've been talking about that for 5 years.
We have been talking about that for so long, and I think I'm holding on now at this point. I think Marcus is probably like, okay, go.
He's ready.
I'm just waiting to get fired. I mean, that would be the best. If you can figure that out, like how to have Heather come back. I tell Heather
that all the time. I will trade places, and I couldn't do her job. I mean, she makes our kids gourmet lunches every day. I'm like, it's too much. Feed me. Don't feed these kids, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, how fun to switch places. I think Heather had a major hernia repair after our 4th son was born, and I had to take over at the house. Not fun.
Yeah, no way.
Not fun. And for a while, I would go up to moms that were, staying at home with the kids and running the logistics of life and the laundry and everything. And you are a superstar. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do, because it is not my job is much, much easier.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Well, we appreciate you. We will definitely have you back. Love hearing the stories, and I'm sure you have a ton more to share. Yeah. Thank you both, Marcus and Matt, for your leadership, the way that you lead your teams, the way that you lead our families. We are better because of y'all. So thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. And I think Heather's coming in next, so we'll hear
her
side of this story.
We're about to get the real story.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks for hanging with us to the end of another episode. If you have thoughts, comments, or feedback you would like to share, please leave us a comment or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Join us again next week for another great conversation.